In 2010, 51-year-old Pam Hupp lived what looked like a quiet, ordinary life in Missouri. To her neighbors and friends, she seemed caring, dependable, and generous. But no one knew that behind the friendly smile was someone obsessed with money and willing to manipulate anyone who trusted her. One of those people was her close friend, Betsy Faria. Betsy had recently been diagnosed with an aggressive form of breast cancer. Although she was undergoing chemotherapy and fighting the disease with everything she had, doctors couldn't promise she would recover. As Betsy's health declined, Pam slowly inserted herself into nearly every part of her life. She volunteered to drive Betsy to chemotherapy appointments. She offered to run errands. She visited often and constantly checked in on her. To Betsy's family, it looked like Pam was simply being a compassionate friend during the hardest time of Betsy's life. But according to prosecutors, every act of kindness served another purpose. Pam wasn't helping Betsy because she cared. She was investing in her. As Betsy's illness progressed, she became increasingly worried about what would happen to her family if she died. She had 2 teenage daughters whom she desperately wanted to protect. She also worried about whether her husband, Russ Faria, would make wise financial decisions after she was gone. Seeing Betsy emotionally vulnerable, Pam seized the opportunity. Rather than encouraging Betsy to leave the money to her own family, Pam suggested something shocking. She convinced Betsy to change the beneficiary on her $150,000 life insurance policy from her husband to Pam herself. Of course, Pam had an explanation. She promised Betsy she wasn't keeping the money. She claimed she would create a trust fund for Betsy's daughters, protecting the money until they were old enough to receive it. It sounded responsible. It sounded selfless. And because Betsy trusted the woman she believed was one of her closest friends, she agreed. The paperwork was signed. Just like that, Pam became the sole beneficiary of $150,000. For most people, that would have been enough. They would simply wait. Pam didn't want to. By late 2011, Betsy was still alive. Yes, the cancer was serious, but she was continuing treatment and still spending time with her family. As long as Betsy lived, Pam couldn't collect a single dollar. On the evening of December 27, 2011, Pam spent the day with Betsy and eventually drove her home. Everything seemed normal. Neighbors saw nothing unusual, but once inside the house, Betsy was attacked with a kitchen knife. She was stabbed once, twice, again, and again. The assault was unbelievably violent. By the time it ended, Betsy had been stabbed 55 times, suffering wounds to her neck, chest, and arms, indicating she had desperately tried to defend herself. Her attacker then walked away, leaving her to die. Hours later, Russ returned home from spending the evening with friends. Instead of being greeted by his wife, he discovered her lifeless body lying on the floor. Panicked, he immediately called 911. The dispatcher listened as Russ desperately tried to explain what he had found. But there was nothing anyone could do. Betsy was already dead. For detectives, the most obvious suspect was the husband. Statistically, spouses are often investigated first in domestic homicides. Russ became the focus almost immediately.
Husband Russ Faria called reporting a suicide. A medical examiner said his wife Betsy was stabbed 55 times, her arms nearly severed.
Pam eagerly inserted herself into the investigation. She willingly sat down with detectives and painted a disturbing picture of Betsy's marriage. According to Pam, Betsy had confided that Russ had become controlling. She claimed Betsy had once told her that Russ held a pillow over her face. She even alleged that Russ had threatened to kill her. Investigators were unable to verify these accusations. No witnesses supported them. No evidence confirmed them. Yet Pam spoke with such confidence that her statements carried enormous weight. Meanwhile, investigators largely ignored evidence that pointed elsewhere, including the fact that Pam stood to inherit $150,000 from Betsy's death. Instead, their case focused almost entirely on Russ. In 2013, he was put on trial. Pam testified as one of the prosecution's key witnesses. Her testimony portrayed Russ as an abusive husband with a motive for murder. The jury believed her. Russ Faria was convicted of murdering his own wife and sentenced to life in prison. As he was led away in handcuffs, Pam received the insurance money she had worked so hard to obtain. For a while, Pam appeared to have gotten away with everything. Russ sat behind bars. The murder case seemed closed, and Pam had the $150,000. But one promise eventually came back to haunt her. Betsy's daughters waited for news about the trust fund their mother had been promised. Months passed, then years. Nothing happened. There was no trust, no protected account, no money waiting for them. Pam had never created one. Realizing they had been deceived, Betsy's daughters filed a civil lawsuit against her. During that lawsuit, attorneys began carefully examining Pam's finances and her previous testimony. What they found changed everything. Pam's statements didn't match the evidence. Several claims she had made under oath appeared to be false. Those discoveries were passed directly to Russ's defense attorneys, who were already appealing his conviction. In 2015, an appellate court ruled that Russ had not received a fair trial. His conviction was overturned.
Was Russ Faria, a man wrongfully convicted for his wife Betsy's 2011 murder. Faria was exonerated in 2015.
After spending nearly 2 years in prison for a crime he did not commit, Russ finally walked free. For investigators, this changed everything. The woman who had helped convict him was now becoming the focus of the investigation herself. Pam knew exactly what was happening. The spotlight had shifted. Investigators were beginning to question her. If they proved she murdered Betsy for the insurance money, her entire scheme would collapse. So she came up with another plan, a bizarre, elaborate plan that sounded like something from a Hollywood thriller. She would convince police that Russ was trying to silence her. If she became the victim of an attempted assassination, maybe investigators would once again believe Russ was a violent killer, and maybe they'd stop looking at her. To make that happen, she needed someone she could manipulate. While driving around local neighborhoods, Pam encountered Louis Gumpenberger, a man living with cognitive impairments and significant physical disabilities. He walked with difficulty. He struggled with balance. He relied on others for many daily tasks. Pam believed he was the perfect target. She approached Louis with an incredible story. She claimed she worked as a producer for Dateline NBC. She told him the show was filming a crime reenactment and needed someone to play the role of an attacker. His job sounded simple. He would read a few lines from a script, pretend to threaten her, and she would make what appeared to be a dramatic 911 call for the television cameras. For participating, she offered him several $100s. Louis believed her. Why wouldn't he? He climbed into Pam's SUV, completely unaware he was walking into a trap. Pam drove Louis to her house. Inside, she handed him a script and carefully explained what he was supposed to say. Then she picked up the phone and dialed 911. Calmly, she told the dispatcher that a man had broken into her home. As the operator listened, Louis began reading his assigned lines, believing he was acting for television. Then, without warning, Pam pulled out a handgun. She fired, then fired again.
911, where's your emergency?
Hey, hello, there's someone breaking in my house. Help!
What's
Help!
the address you're at?
Help!
Want me to give you? Want me to give your wife?
No, I'm not getting in the car with you. No,
What's
get
your
away.
address?
Get out, get out, get out.
Louis collapsed. The 911 operator heard gunshots and frantic shouting before the line went silent. Police rushed to the house, but before they arrived, Pam quickly staged the scene. She stuffed $900 in cash into Louis's pocket. She placed a knife near his body. Then she planted a handwritten note that appeared to be instructions from Russ Faria. The note claimed Louis had been hired to kidnap Pam, force her to withdraw money from the bank, and then kill her. It was all designed to tell one story. Russ was behind everything. Pam was merely the latest victim.
He put a knife and kept going, just yelling random stuff like, "You're going to take me to the bank and get Russ's money."
The problem was, the evidence told a completely different story. Detectives quickly learned that Louis's severe physical limitations made Pam's version of events almost impossible. He could barely keep his balance. He couldn't run. He wasn't physically capable of carrying out the violent attack Pam described. Then investigators examined the handwritten note. Instead of making the story more believable, it seemed strangely convenient. Almost too perfect. Every new piece of evidence pointed in the same direction. Pam hadn't survived an attack. She had created one.
Before the dispatch officer answered, it was dead silence. So there was nothing going on the other side of that phone from the caller, which would be highly unusual if you're involved in a situation she described.
She was arrested and charged with Louis's murder. Faced with overwhelming evidence, she later accepted a plea agreement and received a life sentence.
Prosecutors tell me Hupp will likely serve out her life sentence at the Women's Correctional Facility in Vandalia, Missouri. Reporting in St. Charles, Jacob Long.
But authorities still hadn't formally held her accountable for Betsy's death. Even after receiving life in prison for killing Louis Gumpenberger, one question remained unanswered. Would Pam ever face justice for Betsy Faria? For years, prosecutors continued building their case. Finally, in July 2023, that chapter came to an end. Rather than face another murder trial, Pam entered an Alford plea, a legal plea in which a defendant maintains their innocence while acknowledging that prosecutors have enough evidence to likely secure a conviction.
In 2019, Hupp took a plea deal, admitting there was enough evidence to send her to prison for life.
The court sentenced her to another life sentence for Betsy's murder, to be served concurrently with the one she was already serving. It marked the end of a scheme that had taken more than a decade to fully unravel. A dying woman was betrayed by the friend she trusted most. An innocent husband lost years of his life in prison. A vulnerable man was manipulated into believing he was acting in a television reenactment, only to become the victim of a real homicide. And the lies Pam Hupp carefully constructed to escape justice ultimately became the evidence that destroyed her.